Good morning, students. Let's take the story of Harappa further. I have till date taught you about the weights and measures, the seals, the town planning, the drainage system, and I have tried to reconstruct the entire the lifestyle, the way the Harappans lived, and by now you may have realized that the Indian subcontinent at that time was at its pinnacle. Nowhere in the world we had such an organized system of town planning, the drainage, and it was a very, very urban setup. So even though there was agricultural production, but things like pottery, seals, weights and measures give you an idea, and especially the craft production, they give you an idea how advanced this civilization was. Now, and I also spoke to you about the decline of the Harappan civilization, which is not very easy because we do not know the exact causes for the decline. Maybe the climatic changes, because now the acceptable theory about the decline of the Harappan civilization is that climatic factors were responsible for the decline of the Harappan civilization. Now that explains that why the people abandoned the cities and moved towards central India, the middle Gangetic region. What it does not explain is that why the same system of governance, administration, town planning, seals, weights and measures were not adopted. Why did it happen that they did not again try to recreate the cities? Was it simple and basic that the middle Gangetic region had thick forests and it could not be cleared by the existing technology which they had? Or the move of the Harappans coincided with that of the Aryans, who, even though they were not as advanced, but they moved in horses. The horse riding skills were unknown to the Harappans. We don't find any evidence of horses, which were used by the Harappans. So maybe the horse riding skills uh, were used by them to kind of control this population which was moving. Or it could be that the entire central authority collapsed. There was no other authority which could direct and give orders. Now, in today's lecture, I will explain to you the story of discovery. Now, when the British came to India, and initially, of course, they came as people who were just traders. But when they occupied Bengal, and finally when they started becoming the masters of India, you find that they wanted to understand the Indian population better so that they could control us better. It is for this reason that the Brahmi script, the Prakrit script, and they took a great interest in our ancient civilization. Now, when they came to India, the earliest they could go up to was the Rig Veda, because the four Veds were written, and they thought that the Indian history began from the writings of Rig Veda, and they depended on the Chinese travelers who had come to India and had written an account on it. So these were Buddhist pilgrims who had come to India between 4th to 7th century BCE. Now, this is the story of Alexander Cunningham. He is not only considered as the father of Indian archaeology, but he was also the first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India. He began archaeological excavations in the Indus Valley in the mid-19th century. Now, what were the sources he depended on? He depended on accounts left by Chinese Buddhist pilgrims who had visited the subcontinent. I've just explained to you. Thus, he thought that Indian history began with the first cities in the Ganga Valley, which we will do in the next chapter. So, just to do a quick recap and to make you understand that it was not only the British who actually discovered the various cities of Harappan civilization, but there were a lot of dedicated Indian archaeologists who were involved in the process. So you find that in 1862, Alexander Cunningham appointed as the first Director General of Archaeological Survey of India. Now please see the date. This is 19th century, which means that when the Harappan civilization declined around the 1600, 1700 BC, after that, everyone had forgotten about these cities. Everyone had forgotten that the cities existed, and they were entirely covered with mud. So you find that in 1921, D.R. Sahni discovered Harappa. Dayaram Sahni was a true archaeological genius. I have given his photograph so that you get excited by it. So D.R. Sahni discovered Harappa. 1992, R.D. Banerjee discovered Mohenjo-daro. In 1924, Sir John Marshall announced the discovery of Indus Valley civilization. 1953, Kalibangan was excavated by A. Ghosh, and so on. So you find that there is a time period before each city is being excavated. Even now, there are excavations going on in Rakhigari, which is now believed to be one of the largest sites of the Harappan civilization. Now, Dayaram Sani discovered seals at Harappa, and you find that even Rakhal Das Banerjee, I have given the photograph of Rakhal Das Banerjee here, and it's a trivia, you need not memorize this. So you find that Sir John Marshall had been a good boss to Rakhal Das all through his career until Mohenjo-daro happened. Many a time he came to Rakhal Das's aid when other British officers of the Archaeological Survey of India tried to trip him up. So when in 1912, when the king came visiting, the Grand Darbar was held in 1911 in Calcutta. And it is at this time that it was decided that the capital of India would be shifted from Calcutta to Delhi. So you find that each and every officer was given a Darbar medal. But Raghal Das was left out. Why? Because he was an Indian. And after all, the British practiced the policy of racial discrimination. They considered themselves to be superior. But John Marshall did not leave. He ensured that Rakhal Das Banerjee got the medal. And the confidential letter which I have given is to that effect. So, he wrote this letter to the King of England, and finally Rakhal Das Banerjee was also given a silver Darbar medal. Now, so based on these finds, in 1924, John Marshall, Director General of the ASI, announced the discovery of a new civilization in the Indus Valley to the world. But let us see what happened. Now, when Cunningham came, he could not really understand. He could not really understand the various seals which came into him. So he completely failed to gauge the valuable nature of the seals. And then you find that John Marshall, he brought major change in Indian archaeology. He was the first professional archaeologist to work in India. He brought his experience of working in Greece and Crete to the field. Underline this sentence, it can come as a one marker. More importantly, he looked for pattern of everyday life. He tended to excavate along regular horizontal units, ignoring the stratigraphy of the site. Now, if you see, even our present-day cities are not built on a plain land. There is a stratigraphy. where there can be, and in fact, if you go around to Delhi, there will be a road which is going slightly up, then it is going slightly down. So that is a stratigraphy of the area. So he did not realize that you had to excavate according to the stratigraphy of the site and not horizontal units. This meant that all the artifacts which were recovered from the same unit were grouped together. Thus, valuable information about the context of these finds was lost. So, even though John Marshall was the one who announced the discovery of the Harappan civilization, and he took the Indian history back to 3500 BC. You find that he did make a little bit of a mistake. And a lot of times, John Marshall's contribution has come in the boards. So when you are writing this, you have to also write about his work on the Sanchi Stupa, which is there in the 4th chapter. And then I will recall what I had taught to you about John Marshall. Now, the new techniques and questions were brought about by REM Villa. He became the Director General of ASI in 1944. He recognized the need to follow stratigraphy of the mount rather than to dig along uniform horizontal lines. This is what he rectified the mistakes done by John Marshall. But we can't negate John Marshall's contribution towards ASI because he left India much older than when he had arrived. So he brought military precision to the practice of archaeology. Now, how do we classify finds? How do archaeologists classify their finds? In terms of materials such as stone, clay, metal, bone, ivory, etc. In terms of function, whether an artifact is a tool or an ornament or both, or something meant for ritual use. In context where it was found, was it an artifact found in a house, in a drain, in a grain, in a kiln? And recourse to indirect evidence. There are traces of cotton at some sites, but to know about clothing, they depend on indirect evidence, including depictions in sculpture. I've given a reconstruction of the daily life of the Harappan cities. This is available in the museum. However, we are not too sure, but probably the men wore like this because the priest king, which has been found, he is also wearing a robe kind of a thing like the Romans did. But the flower which is found on him, it shows that probably it was meant for worshipping. Let me now quickly go back and tell you that Cunningham, even though he found regularly seals, he could not understand the significance of the seals because he depended on the Buddhists, travelers who had come. And he thought that Indian history began from the Rigvedic period. Then the most important contribution was done by John Marshall. He's the one who brought military precision into it. But the only mistake which he did was that he ignored the stratigraphy, and you find that in some cases the artifacts got mixed together. This was rectified by REM Villa. Now, you may recall when I was teaching you about the decline of the Harappan civilization, I had mentioned these officers. They were all officers in the East India Company, and their sole thing was to understand the Indian people and to understand our rich history. So when I had mentioned the Dead Man's Lane, and this is what John Marshall had found, and which REM Wheeler deduced that Aryans were responsible for the decline of the Harappan civilization, which was negated by G.F. Dales. So if you see that my videos are interconnected, especially this particular one, there can be a 3-marker question on this. And you will have to write all the points. Unless you write all these 4 points, you may not get marks. Now, in the next lecture, I we will try and see what was the central authority, whether there was any religion which we can find in the available evidence which we have, the material evidences which we have. So till then, please go through this video properly and um, and note down the important points which I have mentioned.